Welcome to the Happy Lawyer Project. I'm your host, Akoma Moronu, and I created the show to help lawyers find happiness in life with a law degree. Together with my guest, we provide knowledge, insight, skills, inspiration, and encouragement you need to find your happy. I was recently scrolling through Facebook and I saw this quote that said, "Your Google search does not equal my law degree." So I have to admit I did giggle a little, but it also made me realize that there is a grain of truth in there. These days, it can seem like everyone thinks that they're a legal expert. And as a result, it can be hard to find reliable legal information on important current issues. That's why I was super excited to get Joel on the show. Joel Cohen is a former BigLaw attorney and the CEO of Talks on Law. He started Talks on Law to leverage technology and create engaging CLE and legal education videos for lawyers and non-lawyers alike. He gets legal experts who are at the top of their field to break down important issues in easy to understand and engaging videos. I mean, how revolutionary does that sound? So on today's show, Joel shares his story of making the most of his time in BigLaw, taking the entrepreneurial leap, and his hopes for the future of legal education. He's such a wonderfully dynamic personality, and I really hope you guys enjoy the show. Welcome back to the Happy Lawyer Project, and as usual, thank you so much for being here. Today, I am super excited and honored to welcome Joel Cohen to the show.
Fantastic to be here.
So, welcome, Joel. It would be so great if you could start by just sharing a brief description of who you are and what it is that you do over at Talks on Law.
Sure. And first, it's a pleasure to be on this platform, and I'm excited with what you're doing to help lawyers be a little bit more well-balanced. So good luck with that. So at Talks on Law, we do legal videos. So we're explaining the law to both lawyers and non-lawyers through the power of video. And as cheesy as that sounds, kind of just bringing the law in line with what's going on in basically every other area of education and entertainment, both for lawyers in the form of engaging CLE and non-lawyers with short explainer videos.
Awesome. So before we go into more of that, because I'm super interested in knowing how you got into that and what you do over there, can you talk a little bit about your journey to getting into Talks on Law? How did you become a lawyer? And then why did you eventually transition into this entrepreneurship space?
Sure. I was kind of a weird little kid and thought that I wanted to be a lawyer since I was, 5 or some absurd age.
5?
Yeah, there's a local newspaper article that I wrote when I was in elementary school that described my trajectory and included that I would go to Duke Law School, which I ended up doing. So I'm not really sure where this idea came from. Maybe it was my parents subconsciously or secretly training me for it. But yeah, I think I wanted to be a lawyer since pretty early days.
That's amazing. We talk a lot about intention setting on this podcast. So even when you don't know you're doing it, you've been doing it since you were 5. You said you were going to be a lawyer. You said you were going to go to Duke Law School. And even at 5, you were good at setting good goals for yourself and making them happen. I've never met a person who went to Duke who didn't love that experience.
I think that's right. I mean, I think lawyers tend to complain about law school to others, but I don't know. I really loved it.
So how did you like the practice of law once you graduated?
So that, I think, was an interesting transition because law school is all about learning and you're still an independent actor. And I went straight from Duke to Skadden. So I was, immersed immediately in the big law world. I was doing M&A, and I think I had been overly frightened at how bad it would be. So in law school, they basically throw horror stories at you about how your future is going to be abysmal and you're not going to have a life. And so it made the transition actually a lot better because, I worked long hours sometimes, but I was also surrounded by really smart people and doing pretty sophisticated stuff. So it was a really nice transition, and I actually enjoyed the practice, but I think it takes a special person to be really a career M&A lawyer. And I realized after a few years that I maybe I didn't have some of the skills that would make it completely obvious for me that this is where I needed to be. And I felt like there were some aspects of what I wanted to do that weren't getting, some itches that weren't getting scratched in the practice, and mostly in the realm of trying to be a little bit more creative or have a little bit more ability to kind of shape what my career was and the types of things that I would be doing. So I think, it was really good training, but at some point I realized I wanted to do something a little bit less of a defined path and kind of create something for myself.
And how long would you say it took from the time that idea, I guess at some point you started to think that it wasn't going to work and it wasn't going to be long-term for you. For some people, that's the second day on the job. For other people, it takes a few years, kind of depends. And then from that point, I guess, what was your plan for figuring out your exit strategy?
Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah, I think for me, it wasn't the second day on the job. In some ways, it was before I took the job. I thought, and I think this is not unusual, that a lot of graduating attorneys think, hey, guess what? I have a lot of debt. The people who seem to be wanting me or are willing to fly me around the country are these same large law firms. Maybe that's the path for me. I go there, get some good experience and training, pay off my debt, and then figure out what's next. So I think I went into the big firm practice with that mentality, and I actually enjoyed it more than I thought I would. So I thought maybe I'll go for 2 years, maybe 3 years, and I ended up staying a couple more. But at some point, I want to say I'm sitting in the office with my partner who's running the deal, and my job was to review this 200-page document to save him some time. This was not even a highly important document to the transaction. And he asked me a very specific question about, I don't know, some type of mechanism for if the deal doesn't go through or if some interest rate fluctuates. And I was the one who was supposed to know the answer to this question, and I didn't. And then he immediately said, well, I think it's mentioned on page 120 subclause B. And I thought, wow, if this guy who's not even supposed to read the document has the incredible attention to detail that he knows it 10 times better than I do, and this is my responsibility, maybe I'm in the wrong place.
That's really fascinating. I think our stories are very similar. I mean, I'm still in BigLaw, but similar in that I came into it thinking I was going to pay off debt and that I was not going to be here that long, and that now I've been there for almost 6 years.
Well, I mean, the good thing, one thing that you really can't beat is it's so important to work with smart people.
Agreed.
And that was one area where I never had any room to complain in the big law world. Maybe it wasn't the most well-rounded person. Maybe we wouldn't be talking about all the same political or scientific things, but when it came to actually doing the job, I never was forced to work with somebody who wasn't competent. And most of my experience was the opposite, was working with people who are really exceptional.
And that's a fantastic place to be, especially coming out of school. I think that we are all, as lawyers, really intellectually curious, and we like to kind of figure out puzzles, and the law can be that way. And for a while, it can be the right puzzle for you. And you don't necessarily have to be there for 20, 30 years for it to be a good decision. You were making the point about a career M&A attorney, and I would argue that I think it takes a special kind of person in the year 2017 to do the same thing for 30 years. By current estimates, the average millennial is going to have 5 different careers in their lifetime. And that's not 5 different jobs. That's 5 different, diverse industries and practices and 5 careers, just because that's the rate at which they think the space is changing and that work and career and life is changing. And I just find that fascinating because lawyers, we do think in a very linear kind of lockstep, especially big law attorneys.
Yeah, no, and I think that was the tradition, and now it seems to be changing, and firms are adapting to that in different ways. But yeah, I mean, even in the law practice, I see people, leaving the firm, going in-house, maybe going back to the firm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so it changes.
So you got this idea, you started to feel like this wasn't the right fit for you. Why leave? I guess, did you think about going in-house?
I thought about a lot of things. I thought maybe I want to do something entrepreneurial. Maybe I want to do business school. Maybe I should do startup law and work for, one of the Wilson Sonsini's of the world and advise early stage companies and then learn about business, learn about entrepreneurship as an advisor to entrepreneurs. But ultimately, and I even sat and took the GMAT thinking about business school, but ultimately I thought, look, I can spend 2 years having a blast at a top business school, racking up the debt that I've only just paid off. Or maybe I can take that same small amount of capital and invest it in my own idea and have my own version of business school by actually trying to do something. So I went with that approach partly because it seemed like 2 years was a luxury I didn't really have to waste. And partly because I was really captured by this idea that ultimately became Talks on Law.
So let's get to Talks on Law. When we first spoke, the end of last year at this point, you were talking to me about how you want to disrupt the legal education space. So can you go into a little bit of why you thought that was necessary and how you think that you're going to be able to do that? Because I think it's such a fascinating topic.
Sure. Yeah, I'm happy to. Well, I wasn't sitting at Skadden thinking, how can I disrupt the legal education space? But I was thinking, hey, I'd love another resource to learn about things that's enjoyable or that can fit into my schedule or that has the mobile and convenient factors that a lawyer basically needs. Because anytime you're in the office, as you know, you're pretty single-mindedly dedicated to your clients. And when you're at home, I know you have 2 small children, you're single-mindedly dedicated to them. So learning on the go is particularly important for lawyers, I think. So yeah, I was looking for a resource that I could use to learn on the go. And as I was looking, I thought maybe there's some space to contribute because maybe there's not enough out there. So essentially, I was looking for a product to use for myself and then ultimately turned that into what the business became. I mean, we started thinking of it like a TED Talks, but for law. So get really smart lawyers doing really interesting things and have them explain what they're doing in, 30 minutes or less. And from there, it kind of developed into the current platform that it is. But yeah, actually, why don't I just stop there because I don't want to ramble.
No. It's fun to listen to people talk about the things they do because they tend to get really excited and rambly.
Exactly.
So how do you feel like what you do is different from what you get from like a PLI webinar type experience for people who haven't been on the site and don't know?
Yeah, no, I mean, PLI is great. And it's basically a historic institution that's done so much for lawyers and the profession. But one thing that it's not really is super convenient and super accessible. I mean, I remember listening to a PLI course that was 3 or 4 hours long on some very dense niche issue that was perhaps really relevant to maybe 100 or 200 lawyers in the country. And that's a service that they're doing, and that's a service that they're going to continue to do. But it wasn't something that I thought I could just jump into and absorb myself in as kind of an educational entertainment experience. I think maybe lawyers as a bunch of overachievers find education components to their entertainment to be very important. And I think that's a little bit of what I was looking to create in Talks on Law, which is just a feeling of excitement and a feeling of kind of like what you might have felt on your first week of law school. You're coming into a class, you don't know that much, you know that you're interested in a particular topic, and let's get some really smart person to kind of inspire you and explain why this is important. And so that's what we're trying to do. So we're not trying to replace PLI, and so glad they're there and doing the work that they're doing. But we wanted to create another option for lawyers to learn and enjoy it as part of a very hectic life of a lawyer. So that's why we've spent so much time and effort designing a really convenient mobile app. That's why we spent so much time talking to people like one of our board members who's from TED on how to make content as engaging and keep your audience paying attention as long as possible. And I think it is a little bit different.
I mean, I think it's completely different. Like, as soon as you come onto the site, like, it feels different in that the video is really high quality video. Like, visually, it's just different. And I think that's the beginning of being engaged, because as soon as you see, you know what the webinars are like. It's like a person at a podium or like at like a table. There's like 3 people.
Yeah.
And you are
or
already
maybe talking into their MacBook.
Correct. And you're already bored before it's even started. Just like, and often I find that when it comes to video, like CLEs, by the time I get to that point, it's because my birthday is like a month away and I need the ethics credits.
Yeah.
And I've just picked whatever topic is going to get me the credit
as
quickly as possible.
We're so spoiled now with the quality of the video that we watch in our daily lives.
Exactly.
That when we have to watch something that looks like it was made for a generation or two ago.
Yep, that's very kind of you.
It's tough. It's tough. We did a bunch of testing on what keeps people's attention, and conversational courses rather than lectures worked out a lot better. Whether it's just the ability of the host, which in some cases is me, saying something like, wait a second, what did you just say? Like, just being able to hear someone else ask the question to the speaker, to the guest, to the expert is really helpful.
That makes sense. And I would probably agree that I am more engaged. I'm definitely somebody who will watch a panel. If it's a topic that I'm interested in, I can definitely sit down and get, really enjoy a lengthy panel discussion, but it's often really high level or really niche. Like, it's hard to really hit it's hard to hit the target, when it comes to teaching content. And
I think that's right. And it's hard to moderate a panel as well. And the people who are good at it, I really take my hat off to them. But, a panel can go wrong pretty quickly. And another thing about having ridiculously smart people speaking in front of a camera is they could be the smartest person in the room, in any room they're in, but they might not be that smart in knowing when to stop talking.
Yeah.
So sometimes they'll just go on and on about something that the audience or that the other guests may or may not care about. And if there's that disconnect, it's kind of a waste.
That's a fair point. And in general, lawyers can be verbose. So I'm sure It happens more than not. But I'd love to transition a little to talk about what it's like day to day for you and how running this is different from what it was like to practice in the BigLaw context. Because I know people think about running a business and some people find it like terrifying. And then other people have this idealized version of what it's like to be in that environment. Yeah,
that seems fair. I mean, the one comment that I get most from lawyers is, oh my God, you must be stressed out of your mind. Like, you've given up this safety net, which is a regular, relatively large paycheck and maybe a gym membership and maybe, some fun outings and occasional lavish dinners. And for what? Now what do you. So, yeah, I mean, I think there's a perception, there's a risk aversion amongst lawyers. We know that that's there. I am not an exception. I sometimes do feel a little bit scared as to the weight of leaving what was a great career and a great practice, which is the practice of law, and do something entrepreneurial. Yeah, sometimes I do feel a little scared about it, but I'd say overwhelmingly it's been very positive for me. I tend to not be a particularly stressed person. That said, every once in a while I'll find myself not being able to get to sleep because I'm thinking of all the things that I have to get done tomorrow. But yeah, I do think that it's particularly challenging for lawyers to transition into entrepreneurship because we've spent so many years following a very clear path, from college to law school to, if you did go into the big firm life, you're basically on that same path. And so stepping off is a challenge. And I mean, I'm glad that I did. And for the other lawyers that I know that have, I admire it. I also admire the dedication to stay on it for many, as long as they're happy.
What's the upside for you? I mean, I understand that it's scary and I understand why it would be stressful, but I guess for people who are thinking about it, what does it actually feel like to be on that side and to feel like you've gotten something off the ground that is meaningful to you?
The biggest upside is that I genuinely love what I do. And
it's a pretty big upside.
So that's pretty big upside. It's kind of hard to beat that. And I'll continue doing it as long as I can afford to. And, the company is still growing. So, that's the biggest upside. Also, in my line of work, my job is essentially to learn something new every day or work on learning something, or, it's talking to really, really ridiculously smart people. So I envy my own job. So I can't really complain about it. Yeah. That said, there are a lot of different challenges that I didn't have to deal with in a law firm role. I mean, I had a secretary who dealt with some of the less legal things in my life. And mostly what I did was review and draft contracts and talk to clients. Now I have to deal with a lot of different things, whether it's figuring out who we're going to hire or managing people in a different way, or dealing with raising capital. We've done some fundraising for the company. These are areas that were kind of new to me and came with a lot of challenges and, some enjoyment, I guess, but, also plenty of, oh my God, I can't believe I have to deal with this. So yeah, I mean, to that end, as a lawyer at a big firm or a lawyer who has an established practice, I can certainly envy the fact that their life is basically doing what it is that they like, which is their practice. And then kind of the other issues are dealt with by the firm itself or by other aspects of the business. Whereas for me, I kind of have to deal with all of it.
Well, hopefully one day you can delegate more of it as your business grows.
That's true. As a small company, you can delegate as much as you want, but you're going to still have to know what's going on, and you're going to still have to ultimately make the decision.
So really quickly, knowing what you know now, is there anything you would have done differently? Would you have approached your time at BigLaw any differently?
Yeah, I think I would have. I think, and this is advice that I used to give to junior associates who are working under me, I would have bothered the partners more. Sometimes there's this thought process that, hey, the partner's so busy, I don't want to go in and look stupid, or maybe he's going to say something slightly negative to me for bothering him. And so there's a tendency to kind of keep your head down and wait until you're summoned. And I don't think that's the right approach most of the time. I think in my current role, it's the people who I'm working with or people who are working for me that bother me about, hey, why don't we do this? Have you thought about doing this? Or I have a new idea for this, that I end up connecting with better, that I end up viewing their opinions in a higher, valuing their opinions higher. And I think back on my time at the firm, and there was a few partners that maybe I was genuinely a little bit afraid of, and I wish I would have been able to overcome that fear and bother them a little bit more, made them explain a little bit more why we were doing things in a certain way. And I think that's probably good advice for associates at any level.
I think that's fantastic advice. And I completely agree. I hadn't really thought about it that way, but I feel like I wish I had leaned in more and been more engaged in my firm before I lateraled, because it wasn't until after I lateraled that I became really good friends with some of the senior associates and partners I used to work for, because they thought we had a better relationship than I thought we had. And perhaps if I had come to them earlier and engaged them more in the conversations about my career, I may still be there. Who knows? But I wish I had sat down with them and kind of talked things through with them because they did care. And I had created this kind of whole story in my head about how, because people say it, right? Like, no one really cares. Firms are just there to like churn and burn you, and you're just a cog in the machine. And I bought into all of it. And then when I left,
people were right.
People were like, "Oh, we're so sad to see you go. Let us know if there's anything we can do to help." And all of a sudden, because I wasn't afraid of being fired, I actually was like, "Oh, let me actually call this person and see if they can help." And they've been so responsive, and we've built really good relationships since then that I wonder if I had done it earlier, what my time there could have been like.
I think that's fair. And I the flip side of it is, so I think part of what you're saying is it's not as cold and as impersonal or as you're just a cog in the machine as it may be perceived. And then I think the other side is if you want to step out of your role as a cog and you kind of need to be noticed and you need to stand out and be a little less fungible. And I think when you're only this tool that's summoned when they need an escrow agreement drafted or they want you to negotiate some minor aspect of the transaction, well, then you really are a cog.
Yep.
And there's 12 other people they can call. Yeah. So, I think, and I don't blame them for that because there's also a huge flux of people coming in and out. And, you get really excited about working with someone and then they leave. It can kind of, over the years and years of working as a partner, it can kind of make you less incentivized to want to connect with these people who may be leaving. But that said, I think it's in the associates' best interests to really push their partners to connect a little bit more, even if they're reluctant at first.
Agreed. And I'm looking at the time, and so we're going to wrap up. But before we wrap up, can you just let people know a little bit more about how Talks on Law works, how they can engage with your content, and what they can do to learn more about what you guys are doing over there?
Yeah, fantastic. So first of all, they can visit us at talksonlaw.com. They can use us for their CLE needs. We have a fantastic mobile app where you can watch all of our interviews with the titans of law as you cruise around town or on your subway commute in or out. And then another area of the company that we're really excited about are our explainer videos, these we call TOL briefs. And with the briefs, we're really working to become the first resource for the public to learn about legal issues. So, a fantastic tool for the public. It's free. They're done by smart lawyers. There's graphics and music, and it makes the law accessible. But really, they're a phenomenal tool for lawyers to build their brand, to expand their business, to carve out a niche in their practice. And we welcome top lawyers to participate and get involved and think of issues that they think the public should know about and that they might be qualified to explain. So if there's people who would be interested in that, we welcome it as well.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for being a part of this project. And before I let you go, I have the last question, which I ask everybody. What do you think is the difference between those lawyers who are able to find happiness in life with a law degree from those who continue to struggle?
Wow, you're going to end with such an easy question. Huh?
Yeah, it's the softball question.
Oh, no, that's very complicated. I think, who knows the answer? I think happiness is something that we could all learn a little bit more about what it means for ourselves. I think the lawyers that I've seen who are happy love their work, enjoy their colleagues in certain aspects of the competitive nature, whether it's, winning a negotiation point or, litigators, winning a certain judgment, those type of things, really enjoying the good moments of their career and then being able to kind of throw off the more arduous, the more stressful aspects by doing something else from time to time, whether it's sports or spending time with family. So, nothing completely revolutionary here. I think figuring out what makes you happy is the real quest.
That's a very fair point. You need to know what's going to make you happy before you can. It seems simple, but so many people skip that step.
Yeah, and it seems like you should be happy if you have a nice car and a nice house, but there's a lot in between.
Great. Well, thank you again.
Wonderful to be here and love what you're doing.
Thank you for joining me for the Happy Lawyer Project podcast. Please head over to my website, www.thehappylawyerproject.com, for more information from today's show. While you're there, I'd love it if you'd leave me your thoughts on the show. You can also connect with me on LinkedIn, Facebook, or follow me on Instagram. If you've enjoyed the show, please share it with your friends. And don't forget to head over to iTunes to subscribe and review the show. As you know, each rating helps more listeners find the show and helps me get awesome guests on here for you guys. If there's anyone you'd like me to have on the show, or if you'd like to be on the show, head over to my website and let me know, or send me an email at Okoma, OKEOMA, @thehappylawyerproject.com. A special thanks to everyone who's left a review, sent me an email, or reached out to me in any way. I appreciate you. Thank you again for spending this time with me, and if you would like to learn more about working in your gift and living your passion, head over to the website for a free gift. Until next time, bye!